The story you've been telling yourself about how she feels, it's almost certainly wrong, not slightly wrong. Completely, fundamentally, in the opposite direction wrong. And the gap between what you assumed and what is actually happening is costing you something real. What we're covering today are 7 specific ways men consistently misread female emotional signals and what is actually happening psychologically underneath the behavior they're interpreting incorrectly. One of them involves the most common misreading in all of male-female interaction, something that happens in virtually every connection that could have been something real. Another involves a female psychological pattern so consistent that researchers can predict it, but that most men experience as completely random. And the climax, the 7th misreading, is the one that causes the most permanent damage to connections that deserved better. Stay with me. Here is the honest premise. Most men are not bad at reading women because they're not paying attention. They're bad at reading women because they're applying the wrong interpretive framework. They're reading female behavior through the lens of how they would behave if they felt the same thing. And male and female emotional expression, shaped by different neurological wiring and different social conditioning, often looks completely different even when it's communicating the same underlying state. Today we correct the framework, 7 specific misreadings, what men think is happening, what is actually happening, and what to do with the accurate interpretation. Let's get into it. Bold claim. Female silence is one of the most consistently misread signals available in human interaction, and the interpretation most men apply to it is almost always wrong. Here is the psychology. Male communication patterns tend toward directness about disinterest. When a man is not interested, he typically reduces communication, becomes less available, less responsive, shorter in his replies. So when men encounter reduced communication from a woman, they apply their own framework. She's pulling back because she's not interested. But female emotional processing works differently. Research on female communication and emotional processing, including work by Deborah Tannen on gender and communication, documents that women often go quiet not when they feel less, but when they feel more. When the emotional stakes of a situation rise, many women process internally before expressing externally. The silence is not withdrawal from feeling. It is the feeling being processed deeply before it is brought into words. Additionally, and this is the part most men miss entirely, female silence is frequently a protective response to uncertainty about how expression will be received. She is not silent because she feels nothing. She is silent because she is not yet certain enough that what she feels will be safe to say. Scenario: a man named Kevin had been building a genuine connection with a woman named Leah for 6 weeks. Then she went quieter. Responses took longer. Conversations felt shorter. Kevin's interpretation: she's losing interest. Kevin's response: he pulled back, became less available, started looking elsewhere. What was actually happening? Leah had realized her feelings were becoming significant, more significant than she had expected, and was processing what that meant before she knew what to do with it. What Kevin's pullback communicated to her: he wasn't as invested as she thought. 2 people who both felt something real, both pulled back simultaneously, both ended up losing something genuine because of a misreading that went uncorrected. What actually works? When she goes quiet, don't match the silence with disappearance. One warm, genuinely pressureless reach out, then patience. Let her process. Be someone she can return to rather than someone who confirmed her fear by leaving. Bold claim. The category error men most consistently make in mixed-gender interaction is interpreting warm, genuine friendliness as evidence of exclusively platonic feeling, when female attraction frequently expresses itself as exactly that. Here is the psychology. Male attraction tends to produce differentiated behavior. Men often act differently around someone they're attracted to, more nervous, more performance-oriented, more aware of themselves. Female attraction frequently produces the opposite. Women who are attracted to someone often become more naturally themselves around that person, warmer, more open, more genuinely at ease, precisely because attraction for women is closely linked to felt safety, and felt safety produces naturalness rather than performance. So the woman who seems completely comfortable, warm, and genuinely friendly, who doesn't seem nervous, who isn't performing interest, may actually be showing you the most significant signal available, that she is so genuinely drawn to you that she is her most authentic self in your presence. Mini story. A man named Derek had been friends with a woman named Melissa for 2 years. She was consistently warm with him, easy, genuine, never seemed nervous, never seemed like she was performing anything. Derek's interpretation, definitely just friends. She's too comfortable to be interested. What Melissa was actually experiencing, she had developed significant feelings for Derek and felt more herself with him than with anyone else in her life. The comfort he read as friendship was actually the highest expression of her attraction, the specific ease that only genuine, significant feeling produces. Melissa eventually told him. Derek's response, "I had no idea. I thought you were so comfortable because you only saw me as a friend." "I was comfortable," she said, "because I felt more myself with you than anywhere else. I thought that was obvious. It wasn't, because he was reading it through the wrong framework." Bold claim. When a woman creates situations that seem designed to provoke a reaction, what most men experience as games or manipulation, she is almost always engaged in something completely different. Genuine, necessary assessment of whether you are who you appear to be. The psychology here draws from attachment theory's concept of secure-based testing. Before a person with any history of relational pain extends full trust and full investment, their attachment system creates low-stakes situations that reveal character. Not to be difficult, to gather real information before making real commitments. She says something slightly provocative and watches how you handle it. She becomes briefly less available and observes whether you become anxious or stay grounded. She expresses a strong opinion and notices whether you cave immediately or hold your own position with warmth. None of this is manipulation. It is the nervous system doing its most important job, determining whether the environment is safe before committing to it. What most men do wrong, they either fail the assessment by becoming reactive and defensive, or they recognize it as a test and try to perform the correct response, which is itself a failure, because the assessment is specifically designed to detect performance versus genuine character. What actually works? Be consistent. Be the same person under mild pressure that you are when everything is comfortable. Don't react to the provocation. Don't perform groundedness. Simply be grounded because you have built that quality genuinely rather than strategically. Bold claim. When a woman responds to something that seems small with what appears to be disproportionate emotion, she is almost never responding to the small thing. She is responding to what the small thing represents within a larger pattern, and understanding this distinction transforms how you navigate conflict. Here is the psychology. Female emotional processing tends to be cumulative and contextual rather than isolated and event-specific. Each individual interaction is processed not just as itself, but as data within an ongoing relational narrative. A canceled plan is not just a canceled plan. It is data point 14 in an ongoing assessment of whether she is a priority. A dismissive comment is not just words said in frustration. It is information about whether she is truly safe with you. When the accumulated data reaches a threshold, when enough individual events have built a pattern that her nervous system needs to address, the response often arrives attached to a trigger that seems disproportionately small, because the trigger is not the source, the pattern is. Scenario. A man named Marcus couldn't understand why a woman named Dana was upset about him being 5 minutes late. "It was 5 minutes," he told his friend. "She acted like I'd committed a crime." What Marcus was missing, it wasn't 5 minutes. It was the 12th time in 3 months that he had communicated, through small, individually insignificant actions, that his time was more important than their shared time. The 5 minutes was just the moment the accumulated data became impossible to continue ignoring. What most men do wrong, they defend against the specific trigger rather than addressing the underlying pattern. They are right that the trigger is small. They are wrong that the trigger is the issue. What actually works? When the response seems disproportionate to the trigger, ask about the pattern rather than defending against the event. I hear that this bothered you. Is this part of something larger that's been building? Bold claim: the most capable, most independent, most self-sufficient women are not the women who need the least from their partners. They are the women who have the most clarity about what they actually need and who will not settle for less. This is one of the most significant misreadings available in mature female psychology. When a man encounters a woman who clearly doesn't need him for practical support, who has her own income, her own social world, her own emotional resources, he sometimes concludes that she doesn't need much from a partner at all. The opposite is closer to true. A woman who has built genuine self-sufficiency has done so partly because previous experiences taught her that depending on people was risky. She has learned to provide for herself what others didn't reliably provide. And in doing so, she has developed very clear knowledge of what she actually wants from a partner, not practical support she can provide herself, but specific emotional qualities that self-sufficiency cannot supply. She needs to be genuinely seen, to be chosen deliberately and specifically, to have a partner who is an equal, someone whose presence adds something rather than requiring management, to feel that choosing to include someone in her full life is worth the vulnerability of doing so. Mini story. A woman named Victoria, 52, highly accomplished, completely self-sufficient, ended a 2-year relationship with a man named Richard. He was genuinely confused. "I gave her everything," he told his friend. "I was always there. I was supportive. I never missed anything important." Victoria, in the conversation that ended things, said, "You were present for everything external. You were never present for me internally. You never asked what I was actually thinking. You never pushed past the surface. You were there, but you never really arrived." Richard had misread her capability as not needing depth. Her independence was not a signal that less was enough. It was a signal that ordinary was not. Bold claim: when a woman becomes quieter or more reflective after a moment of genuine emotional or physical intimacy, most men immediately interpret it as regret or reduced interest, when it is almost always something completely different. The neuroscience here is direct. Genuine intimacy, emotional or physical, produces significant neurochemical changes. Oxytocin release, elevated dopamine, a vulnerability that, particularly for women who have learned to be careful with their emotional exposure, requires integration time. The quiet that follows genuine connection is frequently the nervous system processing something significant, integrating what just became real, finding language for an experience that expanded beyond ordinary categories. It is not regret. It is often the opposite. The specific quietness of someone sitting with something that mattered more than they expected. What most men do wrong, they respond to her quiet with visible anxiety, seeking reassurance, asking if she's okay in ways that communicate their own insecurity rather than genuine curiosity about her experience. That anxiety disrupts her processing and introduces pressure into a space that needed to be unrushed. What actually works: gentle, unhurried presence. Not pressure, not performed casualness. Simple, warm availability that lets her emerge from her processing in her own time and find you still there, still steady, still genuinely present. This is the truth reveal, the deepest misreading, the one that causes the most permanent, most unnecessary damage to genuine connections. Bold claim: when a mature woman holds high standards, when she is clear about what she needs, slow to commit, and unwilling to accept less than genuine compatibility. Most men interpret this as being found inadequate. It is almost always something completely different. Here is the psychological truth. High standards in a woman are almost always the product of experience, of having been in relationships that looked right from the outside and felt wrong from the inside, of having compromised on things that mattered and paid the specific cost of that compromise over years, of having done enough internal work to know, clearly, precisely, with genuine self-knowledge, what she actually needs from a partner versus what she can provide for herself, the woman who takes her time, who asks real questions, who watches how you behave across different circumstances before investing fully, who won't be moved by chemistry alone, who needs to see character confirmed through behavior over time rather than words offered in early enthusiasm. She is not deciding you're not enough. She is being as careful with you as the investment deserves. Because for her, choosing a partner is not a casual decision. It is the decision of a person who knows what genuine compatibility requires and refuses to pretend it exists before she has genuine evidence that it does. Mini story. A man named Alan had been pursuing a woman named Claire for several months. She was warm, genuinely interested, clearly engaged, but she moved slowly, asked deep questions, didn't rush anything. Alan's interpretation, after 4 months. She's stringing me along. If she was really interested, she'd be more invested by now. He pulled back, significantly. Claire noticed immediately, reached out, asked what had changed. He told her honestly, "I felt like you weren't sure about me." She said, "I was being sure about you, taking the time to actually know who you are rather than who you seem to be in the first 3 dates. I've made the mistake of moving faster before. I wasn't doing that again with someone I actually cared about." Alan had misread the pace of genuine investment as evidence of insufficient investment, and in pulling back, in communicating that her careful deliberateness felt like rejection, he nearly cost himself the exact thing her carefulness was designed to protect. Here is the deepest truth. The woman who holds high standards is not telling you that you have failed. She is telling you that she takes this seriously enough to be sure that what she is potentially offering, her genuine, full, informed, deliberate investment, is worth the patience of being properly evaluated before it's given. That is not rejection, that is respect for herself, for the relationship. And if she's still there, still showing up, still engaged, still asking the real questions for you, the man who understands this does not become anxious in the face of high standards. He becomes more himself, because he understands that genuine evaluation is not his enemy. It is the process through which genuine connection becomes possible. And genuine connection, earned rather than assumed, deliberate rather than accidental, built on actual knowledge of each other rather than projection and hope, is the only kind worth having. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Of these 7 misreadings, silence as disinterest, friendliness as friendship only, testing as manipulation, disproportionate response as overreaction, independence as needing less, post-intimacy quiet as regret, and high standards as rejection, which one have you been most wrong about? Not which sounds most interesting. Which one, if you're completely honest, describes a misreading you have made or are making right now about someone in your actual life? Because the cost of these misreadings is not abstract. It is specific connections that could have been something real. Specific people who were showing you genuine feeling in every language available to them, except the one you knew how to read. Drop in the comments. Which misreading hit closest to home? And what changed when you understood it differently? And if today genuinely shifted something in how you understand the people around you, subscribe. Every week, we bring this level of honest psychological depth to the questions that actually matter. See you in the next one.